Welcome back to Kernel at the Buzzer. I'm your host, Colton Johnson. This week, we want to remind you that all the opinions of everyone on this podcast are the opinion of the speaker and the speaker alone and do not reflect the opinion of the entire Kernel. This week, we're going to talk about the Cats and their 13-12 loss against the Georgia Bulldogs and what needs to change, what needs to stay the same ahead of a matchup with the Ohio Bobcats. All that and more next. Welcome back to Kernel at the Buzzer. This week I have two guests. Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Kyle McClelland, a women's basketball head beat.
And I'm Sara Gibson, and I'm a football beat writer.
Now, I was up in that press box this past Saturday. I walked in and I expected the usual. Whenever Kentucky plays a good football team, I expected an absolute beatdown. I think everyone else in there did too. But I'm sure as all of us watched, I was very to the contrary.
Talking with you last week, we made our predictions. We thought it was going to be like a 50-14 type of game. And I think it really shocked the nation. It shocked everybody in Lexington that it was such a close game. We saw like a potential upset, and I think everyone around here was really wanting to see it.
Now, I was sitting up there with Aaron Gershon of Cat's Paws, and, the whole time, you have plays that go Kentucky's way, you have plays that go Georgia's way. And specifically in the first half, you go into halftime 9-3, nothing but field goals. It was kind of an offensive drought. But I want to talk about this defense,
Yeah, the defense killed it. They forced 6 punts. They held the number 2 team in the nation to 262 total yards. So, just saying that sentence alone, it makes you, kind of think it's, surreal that it actually didn't happen. Kentucky's defense, they were locked down. They looked sharp. They proved that they disproved what they did in the South Carolina game, showing that, they can compete. They could actually lock down almost any offense in the nation if they're truly locked in on their keys, their assignments. They looked great.
I completely agree. This Kentucky defense, we knew coming into the season, was going to be the strong point, the staple of this Kentucky football team. And they showed exactly why on Saturday. Not going to lie, I was expecting a bloodbath. I was not expecting the Wildcats to play the Georgia Bulldogs so close. But it was really impressive. Deion Walker was living in the backfield, even though I don't believe he had a sack.
No sacks for the Cats on that day.
No sacks for the Cats,
Wow.
But they were getting consistent pressure on Carson Beck and, like Kai said, held the number 1 team, now number 2 team in the nation, to less than 300 yards.
No, I looked at that stat line with the no sacks, and, in my brain, of course, you want your guys to get to the quarterback. But you're watching the game, and Carson Beck very seldom got out of the pocket. And I think that's probably what their plan was going into it, if I had to guess. But enough about the defensive line. I want to talk about these guys in the secondary, specifically the boys playing safety. Zion Childress and Ty Bryant, heck of a day from both of them. Both each had 5 solo tackles, 5 total. 5 solo tackles, 6 total, and then 1 tackle for loss each. Specifically Zion, because I feel like his impact was, felt more. It kind of sucks that Ty's plays kind of went a little more quietly, but I think Zion just kind of came out and set the tone.
Yeah, 100%. Watching the routes, the Georgia offense is, so complex, and it's not like they're just running these little outs. They have crazy routes that they're running out there, and I just saw a lot of pressure, different schemes going on. They zone, man, switching up, this side zone, this side's man. They're really pressing. They were making sure that Carson Beck wasn't able to, make these very comfortable throws that Carson Beck's probably, used to making every single week because he plays for Georgia. And, the score is already 21-0 first quarter. So I thought the ability to not only do that the first drive, not only do that the second drive, but then to come out at halftime and continue to do it. The receivers they looked rattled. They looked like they couldn't figure out a route. They couldn't figure out what to do out there against the Kentucky secondary.
Now, Sarah, I know you said before that of the position groups on the Wildcat defense, you thought the safeties might have been the worst. That sentiment's not the same for sure, right?
Yes, Mr. Zion Childress, like you said, has completely proven me wrong. When I wrote about the defense before the season started, I 100% thought that the safeties were the weakest group of the defense. Not that they're bad, but just the weakest. I thought, especially with the transfer of DJ Waller coming in to help Max Hairston out on corner and
Mm-hmm.
just with Dion and the experience of the defensive line, that I was like, these safeties
Mm-hmm.
are kind of getting overshadowed, and boy, have I been proven wrong. I mean, Zion has been all over that field, forcing fumbles, almost had a pick six that
Imagine if it counted.
Now,
incomplete,
I
man.
want to.
Oh
I do
my
want to
God.
touch on that play because of the plays of the night. Of course, if that one stands, well, yeah, they called it a pick initially. If it stands, we're talking about a completely different football game. We're talking about 16-3 at halftime.
I'm going to argue that it almost did change the game without even counting because
Deflating.
that place went nuts. And
Yeah.
I know where I was watching the game, the house went nuts. We thought pick six. We were all freaking out. So it's kind of like one of those things. It's like it changed the atmosphere of Lexington. The fans were going wild. Sure, the points didn't count, but that helps the defense out more than anything.
Now, from a rules standpoint, because one, I don't think anybody would protest that if it's the NFL, that's
Right.
a pick six. But it's difficult because I don't know how. I mean, I would have paid money to have been in that conversation with the refs and what they talked about because I
Right.
don't. The ball hits the ground, yes, but he has control of it when it does so. So in my mind, it's either an incompletion or a catch. So in my mind, I guess, I couldn't see it being how it could have been an interception. But I know a bunch of people's argument was that there was not enough evidence in the replay booth to.
Yeah, it was called incomplete on the field, so it's like
I think it was called an interception on the field. People were arguing that there wasn't enough evidence to overturn it when they did.
okay.
That was kind of the thing. But with all that aside, I mean, the defense was kind of firing on all cylinders.
100%.
The defensive line was doing what they needed to do. I think they did what their game plan dictated. I mean, and that, like I said, you love to get to the quarterback, but I think when it comes to what they might have talked about, it looked pretty good. The linebackers kept everything in front of them. Trevor Etienne, of course, he's going to get his numbers, but I think that's solely because of volume.
Yeah.
I mean, the DBs obviously did well. Safeties, just having an immaculate performance. I want to switch it over to this offense. They had a bit of a different narrative. Brock Vandegrift, 14-7 passing, 114 yards, 26 rushing on 13 attempts. I'm still waiting to see something from this guy.
I can't complain too much with his performance against Georgia. That is one of the top defenses in the SEC in the nation. No turnovers, right?
He had the fumble.
But like interceptions, not very many of them so far. I honestly can't complain too much with Brock this game. I expect a lot versus Ohio. If he has any turnovers in this Ohio game or just a lackluster performance, I find that unacceptable.
Well, my thing with Brock is, he's shown us that he can extend the play. Get out of the pocket and he can extend the play. I'm still kind of iffy on his decision-making, and I know you said because of the quality of this Georgia defense, but in the same respect, this guy's been on the same practice field with all those guys for the past 2 years. And we talked about in the last pod that they know him.
Yeah.
He knows them. Now we can
Yeah.
talk about the freshmen, we can dance around all that, but I think from a familiarity standpoint, he kind of should have known what was coming for him.
Yeah, I completely agree, but I also agree with Sara. Like, still nothing really exceptional, but what I put real big emphasis on is he looked better, and
He
that's
did.
all you really need from the quarterback right now. He had 17 more throws than he did last week. At 17 more reps at quarterback where he's getting these throws off. I was sitting there watching. He had some exceptional throws, like left hash, throwing an out on the right sideline. That's a hard throw. That's an NFL throw. So to see him starting to get comfortable, especially against Georgia, he's doing stuff like that.
Mhm.
I'm wanting to see a lot of volume from him in the Ohio game just so he can have those stats that he can look on like, hey, I had 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I can actually do this. And then when we start facing these SEC opponents that are really tough, maybe he can go out there and give us a exceptional game where he has some good stats.
Now, Demi's kind of shown us that he's kind of this rock of this offense. He's been consistent. He's been what they needed,
For
especially
sure.
with Chip out. So, I mean, I can't really touch on much. There's not much that we could say about him now that hasn't been said. I want to talk about this offensive line and how now the patch job of the Georgia defensive line this game might have helped, and it definitely did help. But still, I mean, you're going to go against athletes. I don't care if they're down 4 or 5 defensive linemen. You're going to go against athletes, and
They're
they
insane,
performed
yeah.
well, especially with Yeager out and Mincy, I mean, it seemed like they kind of just patched him together and threw him out there and said, give us what you can, you know?
Yeah, I think it's like the offensive line has looked very good. I think they're getting tired, though, and they're getting to this condition point of the season where they're finally in shape. And they ran the ball 45 times last game. Mm-hmm. Any offensive line is going to be really tired when you're throwing the ball less than you're, running the ball. 170 yards on the ground. That comes from the exceptional blocking. I know Georgia was a little injured, but I definitely think the offensive line looked great.
Great, I would disagree with. I think they played fine. I think they were serviceable against Georgia.
Serviceable.
Against South Carolina, I mean, that was absolutely atrocious. I mean, you can't play like that in the SEC. You're going to get absolutely ran over.
Granted, the South Carolina front seven is kind of ridiculous.
Phenomenal.
It's kind of ridiculous, watching especially the true freshmen. They got
Dylan Stewart.
They're cooking something up down there in Columbia. I don't. Kentucky's never done well against them, but we can. I digress.
Bieber and his boys have it figured
3 years
out.
in a row.
Now, obviously, the offense didn't put up points, but one guy did. Sara, fill me in.
Mr. Alex Rayner had himself a career day against Georgia. He is the team's leading scorer, which isn't too crazy. He's 25 of 49 of Kentucky's points.
Wow.
Against Georgia, he went 4 for 4. Kentucky school record and personal best, 55-yard field goal in the first quarter. You just can't ask for anything better from your kicker unless he's kicking in some PATs, which he never got the opportunity to do.
Yeah, I do kind of want to pose that question. I want an answer from both y'all on this. What does Kentucky need to do to get in the flipping end zone?
It's a rough question. I think just more reps. More. You face a MAC opponent this week. I know it sounds crazy. Like, we're in week 4. They need more reps, but they're playing a MAC opponent this week. You don't have a Power 5 school. Nothing crazy. You just got to keep going, getting everybody used to each other. I think even when Chip comes back, you're going to have 2 halfbacks that can open up the run game more.
Yeah.
Maybe you can have a Sumo coming out in the pass game a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's going to open things up. Ohio week, they got to get the offense going. They got to get the chemistry down to a T.
I agree with you on the Demi point because I think coming into the year, that's kind of what people thought he was going to be. He was going to be that kind of the zoom when Chip is the boom,
100%.
But Sarah, how they got to get 6 up there? What they got to do?
This kind of brings it back to the Brock conversation. I don't think he's been given very many favors by his receivers. Barryon had a big drop in that Georgia game.
I agree.
When a ball hits you in the hands, you have to come down with it. And it was a problem last year when Devin Leary was under center, and it's beginning to be a problem again, I would say. I think the receivers need to catch the ball.
Now, I kind of want to slide into a conversation that I really didn't think we'd be having. I figured it might happen at some point this year. I didn't think it'd be this early.
Okay.
I want to talk about how Stoops cannot seem to get any favors here in Lexington. I want to talk about how people, in my opinion, I don't think there's any single way that he wins in this situation. At midfield, 4th down, with 2 minutes left. I think if he goes for it, the only situation that he wins is if they go for it and get it. Yeah. I think people would have been livid if they go for it and don't get it, and they're livid now that he punted it.
Yeah, so when it happened, I was thinking to myself, like, I think fans would be okay with him if he went for it and didn't get it. But then I remember they're Kentucky fans. They would lash out either way, man. So it's like, yeah, he probably should have gone for it. But like you said, like, either way, he's losing here. I think the defense was playing well enough where you can punt the ball there. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what Mark Stoops was thinking. Mm-hmm. He had timeouts to use. The offense was moving at a better pace than they were in the first half, like being able to get a little deeper downfield, past midfield. Yeah. So I understand Stoops' thinking there. But, again, reiterating what you said, I mean, it's a 50-50 call.
Sara, if you're sitting there on that sideline and it's your decision.
Thankfully, I do not get paid the big bucks to make that decision, and that Stoops does. It is a lose-lose scenario there no matter what. You should probably go for it, but when you look at this game and you look at the stats and you see how Kentucky has outgained Georgia, Kentucky has had more first downs than Georgia. Kentucky,
wow.
Yeah. Like, Kentucky won in, like, every normal facet of the game on paper, so the only reason we lose this game or Kentucky loses this game is Stoops' decision making and the coaching staff's decision making because they executed.
Now, outside of that play, I don't think anybody would argue that throughout the whole game, Stoops played very conservative.
Yeah.
Like, it was all runs, very seldom did he pass. I mean, there were occasional shots downfield, very seldom did they connect. But I tried talking to Bush after, every time you ask him a question about why he did or didn't do something, that you never really get anything concrete. It's always, I got to go see the film. I got to go see what we did. Dude, you called the plays.
Yeah.
What were you seeing at the time that dictated that you wanted, like, why did you stop running it? Why didn't you, I don't know. I could sit here and have a whole tangent about Bush Hamden.
It's a good style. I mean, like, you're playing the number
Establishing
one.
the run is good. I'm not knocking them, but
You're playing the number one team. It's like you're going out there, you're wasting the time, trusting your defense, you're running the ball down their mouth. It works, but then, like, when you come to that punt scenario and you need 7-8 yards to get that first down,
yeah.
we don't really trust Brock right now to go out there and make a big play like that. So
you can't run it.
Yeah. They probably, I would not be surprised if it's like a 4th and 4 later in the season and we get a run. I mean, in a big play like that, that'd be great.
In a must-get scenario. Now, I think the talks are kind of, I don't think they're as serious as people are making them seem to be, the whole Stoops hot seat talks. I think his seat is fairly cold right now. But, Sarah, what needs, like, in your brain, what's the crash course for this guy? And do you think we get to the point where that we're having it might be time for somebody else?
I think at the end of this season, the conversations amongst fans and some media members, some media outlets are definitely going to be calling for Stoops' head. I think people are no longer happy or being complacent with the 7 to 8 win seasons, and especially now with the 12-team college playoff, a lot of these bowl games simply don't matter anymore. Yeah. It's the college football playoff or nothing, especially in the SEC. So
yeah, very true.
I definitely can see people wanting Stoops gone at the end of this year.
Kai, what you think?
I think this is going to sound like the most straightforward answer, but it comes with wins and losses. If you go out there and you're in this crazy SEC schedule, it's filled, you're adding Texas now, you're playing at Ole Miss in 2 weeks, I think if you get one of those wins, it's respectable. You add it to the resume, and you're sitting there like, hey, maybe we didn't win 7 or 8 games this year, but we beat one of the best teams out there, one of the best teams in the SEC. I think that's what Stoops has to do. He has to go out there and get a big win. This Georgia game was the big win that he should have got.
Yeah.
Now he has to make up for it. So I think it's starting to get a little warm.
There was a sense of damage control in that press room after, because there was a sense of, among the reporters in there, that we knew he wasn't going to come in there and he was going to act unhappy. We all knew it deep down. He was happy with how they played. Obviously, he wanted to get the win. But Bush reiterated it. Brad did. Zion did, and Stoops did. They all said, we're not happy with these moral victories.
And
I think they should be happy with the moral victories.
Yeah, and I know he said he stood by his decision to punt, and he said it twice. So it's like
he opened with it.
Yeah,
he opened with it. He sat down. He said, "I know that y'all are gonna be talking about it." He said, "If I could go back, I wouldn't change it." Fair enough.
Respectable.
Fair enough. Now, speaking of Stoops' press conferences, he had one this Monday. They kind of touched on the Georgia game, but I want to talk, kind of venue into this Ohio game. He said, "I know it sounds like coach speak, but that's a good football team." Talking about Ohio, I really, 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 really hope that he's not trying to manage expectations heading into a non-conference game.
I 100% think he is. Ohio is, I guess you could say, sneaky good. They are
2-1. Yeah,
2-1. Their only loss comes to Syracuse. They will be competing in the MAC at the end of the year. They're a good football team for what they are. When you come into town in the SEC school and the Kroger Field, there's no reason they should be competing in this game. Yes, they are only allowing 3.5 yards per rush, but at the same time, Demi has had a fantastic year. Kai says at least in the run game, the offensive line is holding up. That is true. So despite how good their rushing defense is, we should still run the ball right down their throat, and this should be a blowout victory for the Wildcats.
I mean, I can't really do anything else but agree. I think it should be kind of like this Southern Miss 2.0.
Yeah, I'm gonna I don't want to sound like Ohio's going to be Kentucky. I'm not saying that. But when they're giving up, they play at Syracuse. That's a huge team, kind of the level of Kentucky in the ACC. And they have a whole lot more playmakers on their offense, like Kyle McCord, LaQuinn Allen. You got guys like that. You're allowing 38 points. I think it's kind of like funny that I'm even saying this, but Kentucky definitely has a better defense. I don't see Ohio scoring, but I also kind of don't see Kentucky scoring either. So it's like you're expecting maybe like a 21-7 Kentucky win.
Based off these first two games, I've kind of have this irrational fear in the back of my mind that we're never really going to see the Kentucky team from both sides of the football firing on all cylinders. I have this. I just think we're never going to see Brock going out there and dealing. We're never going to see the defense going out there and shutting somebody out. I'm petrified that that's never going to happen.
That we're never going to see complimentary football?
I just don't think it's a possibility in Lexington this year. But, I mean, y'all can feed in on that if you think that's ever going to happen.
I'm going to say no because I think about the Ole Miss. I think about the Texas teams that are out there that they're facing this year. Those teams are putting up 50 on Kentucky regardless. Maybe not 50, but they're going to put up points on Kentucky's defense. They're not going to shut them down like they did Georgia. And then they have to answer. Yeah. The next drive, they have to score to stay in the game. And it's going to be a field goal or a punt every time. That's how I truly believe in this offense right now. So,
all right, so we're going to feed into it. The official score predictions. Ring them off.
If Kentucky does not score in the first half, I have alarm bells going off in my head.
Touchdowns. Doesn't score touchdowns in the first
That's what I'm talking, yes. If Kentucky does not score touchdowns in the first half, I have alarm bells going off in my head.
Yep.
I see something along the lines of 35-10, 35-3. I don't know if Ohio scores a touchdown or not.
Okay.
I think we get another Rainer masterclass. I'm saying 6 field goals this week. I'll give Kentucky the 1 touchdown. So
25 points.
Yeah, we'll say 25-10. 25-10 Kentucky.
I'd be disappointed with 25 points from the Kentucky offense.
I think that'd be poor. I mean, yes. Anything less, I think, honestly, only 2 touchdowns would be disappointing.
I'll add 1 in there because earlier I said Brock's going to give you 202 this week. So 2 passing touchdowns for the kid.
Honestly, I'd be disappointed with 202. You should be throwing for more than 200 yards against Ohio, and you should be throwing for more than 2 touchdowns against Ohio.
I want to know how much of that is his doing, though, when it comes to what's being called, what his reads are, where Bush wants the ball to go. At the end of the day, it's Brock's decision where the ball goes. But I'd be curious to.
It's a run offense. I mean, 45 carries compared to 27 throws. I mean, period.
And, I mean, I'll to the day I die, I will argue that it is more effective to establish the run game initially than the pass game.
For sure.
I think it opens up the game so much more for an offense. But, I mean, I don't know if that can even happen in general. But, y'all got any more you want to add? Any more special thoughts?
No, I'm good. I want Chip to come back so bad. Stoop said he's not available again. And it's like we're wondering. I thought he was going to play against Georgia.
He's still in the cast.
Yeah. So I'm just like wondering when he's going to start getting into the offense. You're not going to throw him out there at Ole Miss. If he does,
I mean,
that's scary, man. So I don't know. I want Chip to come back. I want this offense to open up with him out there.
Sara, any words of wisdom heading into a non-conference game that you want to put out in the universe?
Words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom.
No, but I will just say that I expect a blowout victory for the Wildcats, and if anything less, expect to see a very strongly worded column out of me.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that no matter what happens on Saturday, I think we'll have plenty of storylines to go off of. But with that being said, I want to thank you 2 goobers for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
New place.
Like the setup.
Fancy stuff.
I love it.
Yeah. Don't write home about it. Don't tell your mother. All right, cool. We're going to get out of here. We want to thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Kernel at the Buzzer. We'll be back with plenty more next week after the Cats take on the Bobcats of the University of Ohio ahead of a matchup with another Heisman hopeful in Jackson Dart and his Ole Miss Rebels. Until then, I want to encourage you to go to KYKernel.com or KYKernel Sports on Twitter or X for all of your UK athletics coverage. And until then, I've been Colton Johnson. We'll see you next time.